beautiful illustration of the vagaries of this job is that I start describing to you the phone-in that I don't want to have, but obviously you're not hanging on my every syllable, and therefore, you sort of get the gist of what I'm saying. Obviously you're not quite as thick as Jason, who's just got in touch to say, why aren't you talking about Nissan? Mate, I did 5 minutes on it in the last hour, roughly around the time you sent your text, you dope. But hey-ho, there's the Brexit mindset in a blinking nutshell. So I'm describing the phone-in I don't want to have because I think it might be too bleak, as in the question of why are we in the UK as we move into the second year now of this pandemic. And I mean that from the first case being recorded in December 2019. I don't mean the second year as in, it's now 2021. It is now the 13th month, the second year that this global pandemic has been in place. How the hell can one of the biggest economies on the planet be the worst hit country in terms of death? And I hate this. I genuinely hate it. I almost wish people in charge were people that I held in slightly higher regard, or people that I hadn't spent the last few years describing the myriad failings and flaws of, because I get it. Even if you're not a victim or a participant in footballification, you're still susceptible to it. You're still a victim of it, actually, even if you're not a participant in it. Because I say, oh my God, this is awful. And you say, and I understand why, I understand the effort that's been put into turning you into this person. You say, oh, something woke, something lefty or something, don't you? Instead of saying, oh my God, I don't care what football team you support, what party you voted for, what posters you've got on your wall, why the hell is my country the worst in the world for COVID deaths right now? Why? Not least given the privations and the suffering that every single human in this land has endured since it started. So that was the question I wasn't going to ask. And here I am asking it. So I will take a few on that, because I'm not going to get the chance to ask any government politicians. And even if I did get the chance to ask any government politicians, they wouldn't answer the question. I don't know if you watched the press conference yesterday. I found myself actually apologising to Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, because I suggested yesterday morning that he was essentially the new Chris Grayling, the man with whom, or the person with whom, the gulf between the question asked and the answer offered was biggest. And then I watched Priti Patel hosting a press conference. And I thought, this is actually surreal. It's almost as if someone said, what time is it? And she said, fish and chips. What time is it, Home Secretary? Well, that is a very important question, and I will be answering it imminently. And the answer is fish and chips. Chief Medical Officer, what would you like to say in answer? Back to the press. And here is Keith from LBC. Do you have a question? Thank you, Keith. What's your question? Hello, Home Secretary. What are you going to be having for dinner tonight? Thank you, Keith. That's an excellent question, and we will be answering it 4:20. Thank you. And that's what happens now in these press conferences. So I think it was a woman from Huffington Post who said, why do you think the UK has the highest death rate in the world? And Priti Patel said, thank you very much. That is an excellent question. The answer, of course, is fish and chips. Now I'm handing over to the medical fella next to me. The other thought I had when I saw Priti Patel involved Anne Widdecombe. I may need to explain more. How close a listener to this programme would you have to be to understand why, when I saw Priti Patel standing on a special box so that she could reach the lectern yesterday, I found myself thinking of Anne Widdecombe. If you can remember that story, you might get a free T-shirt, actually. A free Mystery Hour T-shirt, which is, we're going to be doing some fundraising, I think, with that in the near future. If you can, the story of Anne Widdecombe, I nearly said Anne Widdecombe's box, that would have been very unfortunate. The story of Anne Widdecombe and a box, which came back to me yesterday when I saw Priti Patel having to stand on one in order to reach the lectern. For the record, there's nothing wrong with being short. Some of my best friends are short. But anyway, if you know that story, then I'll tell you the Hong Kong Phooey revelation early. I bet no one, even Wayne in Basildon won't remember that one, or Gary Burton won't even remember that one. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. So it is a very serious question. It's a horrible question. It's an important question. And we will ask it in a moment. Why do you think? I'll take any answer you've got. I can't imagine there's a positive one, or one that excuses the government, which is why most of your media won't be asking the question. But if you think there is, front of the queue. Seriously, front of the queue. Why do you think the United Kingdom currently has the highest COVID death rate? I have to keep saying these words. You almost want asterisks. In the world. Speaking of Priti Patel, you may have wondered what I was blathering on about when Sadiq Khan was here a moment ago and I started talking about Joe Biden. You will remember that a Cabinet Office inquiry into allegations of bullying by Priti Patel found evidence that she had broken the ministerial code. That is how it was reported, and it wasn't challenged. However, Boris Johnson is the sole arbiter of the rules, and he has sort of brushed it under the proverbial carpet. Now, I have in the past suggested that there's no such thing as a culture war. A culture war is essentially racists getting very unhappy about being told to stop being so racist all the time. And they dress it up as a culture war. They hitch themselves to the trans debate, which has some relevance in the context of cancel culture and culture wars, but none of the race stuff does. It's basically like the word woke was invented by fans of Donald Trump's fascism to try to silence people describing Donald Trump's fascism. But the culture war possibly does exist, because I was thinking, if you were to see Joe Biden and Boris Johnson as opposites, if, that brilliant question Sam Coates on Sky asked Johnson, do you think Joe Biden is woke? And Johnson couldn't answer because he knows what woke means. It means anti-racist, but he also knows that his own housing secretary had written an article 2 days previously pledging to look after statues, because that's really important. So maybe there is a culture war, because Boris Johnson's attitude to bullying was made pretty clear by the decision to ignore the findings of the inquiry into Priti Patel's bullying. Joe Biden, by contrast, makes me wonder whether actually that there is a culture war.
If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Everybody is entitled to be treated with decency and dignity.
That's in the American government, of course, or the American administration, not the Home Office. Tom's in Manchester. Just steer us back to this horrible but urgent question, Tom. Why do you think, because none of us can know for sure, but why do you think the UK currently has the highest rolling 7-day average of COVID-19 deaths on the planet?
Okay, is that me? I'm Tom in Ealing, actually, not Manchester. But
I don't know how the hell that's happened.
Don't worry, that's
Carry
fine.
on.
Well, I said to your researcher...
I'll tell you what, mate, you get your thoughts in a row and I'll come back to you. Joe's in Worcester. Joe, what would you like to say?
Well, hi, James.
Hello, James.
This is the first time I've called in.
You're very welcome.
Big fan. The reason why I think it is because the government has failed to understand exponential growth and also failed to learn the lesson of exponential growth 2 or 3 times now, that if case numbers are going up, you have to act. You have to do something. If your R number is above 1, it is only going to get worse, and you're going to have to act sooner.
What do you think they were hoping would happen? And I don't...
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean...
No, I mean it, though. Don't say exactly. I want you to tell me.
It's a strange one, isn't it? It's almost as if, by delaying a decision, it makes a decision easier, but it's only going to have a worse outcome. And you've got to realise that if you're the decision maker. So, yeah, you can delay and delay and delay until you haven't got any decisions to make, because the only decision you can make is
the Brit Raphael Bear wrote a superb article, I think in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago, that made this point, and it really haunts me. The idea that Johnson postpones everything until it is actually easy to make a decision. But, of course, all the other options that were far better than the 2 choices you're left with, they've sailed. They've sailed over the horizon. Yeah. And that does actually explain how we've ended up where we've ended up.
And I think I was looking back at my text messages from March last year, and when the rest of Europe was all in a lockdown around about the 12th of March, and me and my colleagues were locking down our lives, because we were saying this is ridiculous. The UK is the only country now with the schools and the restaurants open and everything, and we know that the R number is above 1. So whatever we do, if we do it late, there's going to be more cases, there's going to be more death. So it's just
they're not learning from the mistakes the last time around because they're psychologically incapable that they've ever made a mistake. That seems to me to be part of it.
Exactly. And just one other second part, I guess, the other reason, is that from the start, there hasn't been the pursuit of zero COVID, which we have seen in other countries. So in this country, it's always been about sort of suppressing the levels of cases, which they've done badly, because as soon as your R number goes above 1, then you're in trouble, right? Because you've acted too late already. But there's never really been the stress on having zero cases, which is what we should have had from the very beginning. And then we could track and trace, and then we could actually effectively eradicate the virus. Still, I heard someone on the news the other day saying, oh, we're never really going to be able to get on top of this, so we just need to... I don't know
whether that becomes true. I mean, we were speaking to Devi Sridhar from Edinburgh University quite early on in this saga, and that was very much the path that she was espousing and endorsing. I'm not going to lie to you, Joe. I being a complete amateur, a complete layman, it sounded to me like it might be too high a mountain to climb. But Japan, more than New Zealand, because New Zealand is close to unique demographically and geographically, but Japan sort of pulled it off on a scale that is almost unbelievable compared to us. And Japan's economy is comparable to ours. Their population is, I think, almost double ours. The population density in their big cities, and they had a proper crack at it. And then, having failed miserably in the first wave and seen the UK's deaths be among the worst in the world, they just sort of thought, well, I mean, it's that old adage which apparently Albert Einstein never said, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again, hoping for a different result. I think that's where we are for the third time now.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And there may not be an answer. I mean, it may just be the general incompetence. Thank you, Joe. Welcome to the show. Maria Caulfield was the Conservative politician who was also doing shifts in the NHS during the coronavirus crisis. A nurse, I think, rather than a doctor. But all hands to the pump. I think she may have done something unhelpful regarding PPE, but I don't have her. I've got a pretty good memory, but it's not encyclopedic, so forgive me if I've misremembered that. We're looking at the rather bigger question of why you think it's happened again, you see. So I appreciate that not everybody shares my belief in the best of everybody. I tried to see the best in everybody, even politicians. I had to make an exception after the referendum, because I felt if you let these cheats and liars go unchallenged, then God knows what they're going to end up in charge of next. Although even I never imagined it would be a global pandemic, and their utter unsuitability for office would be proved by the fact that we lost more people to it than anyone else, practically. I mean, goodness me, that's the point where debate should really end, isn't it? Why wouldn't you let it go? Why did you keep banging on about it? Because the people that sold it to you cannot be trusted. And if you allow people who can't be trusted to triumph, if you allow cheats to prosper, they move on to the next grift, or they move on to the next problem. I didn't for a moment imagine that the next problem would be a global pandemic that would leave 100,000 Brits dead. God knows how many unnecessarily, but if you look at the numbers in Japan, you could perhaps do a calculation. And that is why you couldn't let it go. It's why you couldn't leave it be. But I still believe that most people, given an opportunity, will be good, will be decent, will be fair, especially if they get some therapy. And it's why I kept saying to you for all of last year, just because they messed everything up yesterday doesn't mean they'll mess it up today or tomorrow. But here we are in a third wave, effectively, and the worst in the world. The worst in the world. Why? ERA, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is in Croydon. ERA, what would you like to say?
James, you've pronounced it perfectly, so congratulations and well done.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to try and be brief. There are, I think, and I don't propose to be an oracle, but there are two parts, I think, to this, and they're not the minutiae. They're a little bit broader. The first is not the absence of good leadership, as you've been banging on about this, but it's not the absence of good leadership. It's the presence of unbridled incompetence. That's incompetence without any direction or curtailing. It's just incompetence all over, like the next thing is incompetent and the next thing is incompetent, and there isn't a stop to it. And then there's the second bit, is worse and is quite insidious is that there's no check or balance. When I say no balance, no check or reveal of it. And what I mean is that I'm going to say the media, the press, the organ that we are supposed to use to hear that those people who we call our leaders have done something wrong are not interested in letting us know that, because they're commercial organisations.
That's a ridiculous accusation. They are today, for example, they are dealing with the urgent issue of Leicester University contemplating the possibility of removing Chaucer from its curriculum. How dare you suggest that the great beasts of British journalism don't pick the right battles, ERA?
The problem we have is, for example, at the meeting like Priti Patel yesterday, when she's asked a question, if actually the people who are trained and equipped and really skillful at revealing the truth and getting the truth for our benefit, enabling leaders to be better, if they heard a question from one person be ignored, and remember the people who organise this press conference have decided that there won't be rebuttal questions. So they hear their colleague ask a question that was ignored, they can then ask the question again. On occasion they've attempted to do that. You remember when the same question was asked Mr. Howard 14 times, and it was a revelation.
It was a bit performative, the Paxman, but it was. Yeah, you're right. It was a seminal moment.
The principle is there's a question on which the lives of 100,000 citizens, many of whom would have been voters, elected, that put you where you are. There's a question that requires an answer, and you've attempted one, but not.
Well, maybe there is. I mean, it's interesting hearing you.
The next person doesn't ask it.
No, I know they don't, and I do think they should. But I believe this, or I did believe it, and in many ways, you're preaching to the choir. I think I tweeted yesterday that I wish they'd ask the same question, because I thought that was the way to sort of defuse Trump and his dishonesty. Well, I wonder, this often happens to me, ERA. I hear somebody making a point that I've made myself, and because my mind is constructed in such an infernal and obtuse and irritating way, I start trying to pick apart what you're saying, because
the commercial imperative to be.
No, I know all of that. I've written a flipping book. I've written a book about it, mate. I'm not taking any lessons on the tyranny of.
No, and I'm so grateful that you have. And
hang on.
I'm only amplifying it.
Yes, I know, but let me think, because what you and I want is Priti Patel yesterday, when asked that question, to tell the truth and to say, because we've been a bit rubbish.
No. I hope you don't misunderstand me. No, that's not what I want. What I want.
Well, what other answer is there, really? I mean, I'm collecting answers today, but what other answers is there? You say to the Home Secretary, the proven bully, just for the record, you say, why do you think you're getting advice we're not getting? You're speaking to people we're not speaking to. You're seeing information we're not seeing. You've got data we've not got. Why do you think we are the worst in the world again? And the answer the first time round could have been, you could have said something, and you said, oh, right, fair enough. Like Sweden. They took a risk. It backfired horribly, but they explained the risk, they understood the risk, and they've admitted the scale of the error, even though some headbangers in this country are still clinging to the carcass of Sweden's herd immunity policy. But here, what can she say that would make you happy? All she can say that would send you away happy is, we've made a terrible mistake and we're really sorry. And they're never going to say that.
She can't make me happy. All she can do is tell her truth.
And what do you think that is, though?
Then we can decide. They're not going to tell us the reason. That's the answer.
So you keep asking it until that conclusion that you've already arrived at has landed in every home in the land. That, my God, these people are never going to tell us the truth. Because at the moment, by filling space until the end of the question, by answering a question that she hasn't been asked, by filling the space with gibberish, the people with the scarf, usually the Brexit scarf still, rather than the Tory scarf, but the people with their scarf tied so tightly around their neck that it's cut off the flow of blood to their brains, they can still kid themselves that they're not being taken for mugs.
Yes.
And
then we are diverted, and our attention is taken away, and we're off to the next thing. And a bird! Oh, look at that, a squirrel!
Yeah.
And that's what happens that's what happens.
Look over there, Chaucer.
Goodness.
Statues. Statues.
Yes. And why are they writing about statues? That's so uncivil. And then all of
it's
that
our culture.
goes on. Yes, then it's our culture.
Just don't mention all the libraries they shut, whatever you do.
And by the way, without borders, we don't have a country. And all of that, and we forget that the person didn't get
I still live in hope that there may be a more charitable interpretation of why.
I don't.
Well,
And
I know you don't, but you're, what do you mean? How dare you suggest
I don't.
that my natural ebullience and optimism may sometimes be strained? I'm going to play the Fauci clip again because I would pay real money. I bought a lottery ticket last weekend, first time in years, and I won. And that little moment, I don't know if you get that little moment where you get the email, I did it online, and you get the email on Sunday morning saying you've won the lottery. And you just allow yourself that little, because you know it's going to be tuppence halfpenny. But you could just sit there. I was in bed, actually, on Sunday morning. Apologies for putting that image in your mind. But oh man, that little, what would I do first? I'd probably buy Keith a Ferrari. All the things I'd go through of what would you spend the money on and all of that. I can't even remember why I bought one, but it was 30 quid. But still, that 5 minutes that you got where you thought it might have been a couple of million would have been magnificent. And if I did, I would pay real money to hear Whitty or Van Tam speak in the way, to be freed from incompetent political leaders and find out what they really thought all along. So I'm going to play this again because, well, it should be on prescription.
For so many times you stood up behind a podium with Donald Trump standing behind you. That was a different feeling, I'm sure, than it is today.
Yeah, but you said I was joking about it. I was very serious about it. I wasn't joking. No, actually, I mean, obviously, I don't want to be going back, over history, but it was very clear that there were things that were said, be it regarding things like hydroxychloroquine and other things like that, that really was uncomfortable because they were not based on scientific fact. I can tell you, I take no pleasure at all in being in a situation of contradicting the president. So it was really something that you didn't feel that you could actually say something and there wouldn't be any repercussions about it. The idea that you can get up here and talk about what you know, what the evidence, what the science is, and no, that's it. Let the science speak. It is somewhat of a liberating
experience. It's a horrible question, actually. We may move on to house parties a little later, because, again, you box me into an impossible position. I'm going to defend Priti Patel on this one, because a lot of people were mocking her yesterday for announcing the fines for gatherings in houses of, was it 15 people? More than 15 people. A lot of people were expressing confusion, but, well, you know how I operate. I kind of have a bit of a think, and it means that they know something we don't know. There's no way they would just randomly pluck that out of the ether, especially given that the government thus far seems very reluctant to bring in the rules that most sensible people acknowledge we need. What would we give for an unfettered Fauci to be bestriding the corridors of power in Britain at the moment? That's not for a minute to suggest that our own chief medical and chief scientific officers and their colleagues are in any way inferior to Fauci, but I think it's fair to say that they're fettered. You can see how flipping fettered they are from space at the moment. Was it the one that refused to excuse Dominic Cummings and then disappeared for 4 months, like Trotsky after Stalin came to power? It was quite incredible. But I digress. In fact, I digress so much, I've forgotten what I was talking. Oh, yeah. Why Priti Patel, I think, yesterday must have done the right thing. They would not have announced that thing, the fines, 800 quid if you're having a house party, unless they had evidence that there was a lot of house parties going on. So before the story broke about 400 people attending a wedding in Stamford Hill at a school with blacked out windows, which does, one swallow does not a summer make, one wedding does not a coronavirus busting nationwide catastrophe make, but it speaks of a certain school of thought, if you pardon the pun. They must know. So I checked with some of my more youthful colleagues this morning, and I said to my more youthful colleagues, and I'm talking mid to late 20s, so not Keith, I said, if you wanted to go to a house party this weekend, could you And she said, off the top of my head, at least 3. And that's without even making any phone calls. And what do you mean by a house party? And she said, yeah, all right, Grandad. No, I can remember what a house party is. You know, it's a party in a house. Yeah, you're writing this down, Keith. This is golden. Let's get back to the phones. Patrick's in Kilkeel. Where's that?
Kilkeel, we're in the mountains of Mourne.
That's what I thought.
Southeast corner of Northern Ireland.
That's what I thought.
The north.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're very welcome. We shall stay away from matters Northern Irish at the moment because it's too blooming depressing. Let's focus instead upon the international global pandemic.
We're not all that bad, but I'll come back to that.
Yes.
No, I think it comes down to me, in big part, to leadership and trust. I was watching Dr. Merkel, and I stress Dr. Merkel, the German Chancellor,
do you know, I didn't know
giving
that.
a briefing 2 days ago. And she comes across serious. She gives you the facts. She doesn't shy away from problems. I'm talking to German friends. There's a huge amount of trust there. Boris comes up to the podium, talks about bugles tooting coming over the hill and this sort of thing, fires in a few Latin words, tells Keir Starmer at question time it's 403, not 413, and wrongly challenges his smiles and then gets it wrong himself. And you just come to the thing of, you're lightweight, I can't trust you. Anything he's kind of saying just doesn't have that air of authority. Fauci, brilliant. He comes to
hang on a minute. I mean, America is almost as bad as us. So Fauci's been there all along. I appreciate that Trump as the reason why so many Americans are dead.
Yeah, back to leadership.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So Fauci unfettered. It's a nice little phrase, that, isn't it? It should be a DVD special. Fauci unfettered.
Absolutely.
But we need Witty unfettered or Van Tam unfettered. I'd go for Van Tam unfettered.
Well, I mean, you look at Prime Minister's question time, and Boris occasionally has to be reminded that it's Prime Minister's questions time. He doesn't. He's a great way of avoiding the answer to things, and that does not help when you're looking for a leader to trust in a time like this.
I mean, that is going to be part of it. I suppose
it's not the whole part.
No, we're never going to get the whole part of it, are we, Patrick? Yeah. But I think, for me at least, doing what I do for a living, and obviously allying myself to the causes that I've allied myself to over the last few years, Brexit still prevents people from acknowledging just how useless Boris Johnson is.
I think so. And if I could put
it's like a suit of armour for him. Oddly, the worse it goes, the more people dig in and double down, which has freed him up to preside over the worst pandemic response on the planet, according to current figures, with people still waving their little fags and claiming that he's doing his best.
Yeah, very much so. And as I say, we have Robin Swan here, our health minister in Northern Ireland, stroke the north of Ireland. Have to be careful there. And
just for now, Patrick.
Oh, always. he keeps a serious demeanour. He comes across. He tells you the facts. Tells you things are going to be tough, and you believe him. And people have a lot of trust in him for that. And it's that, I think, that is not the only thing, but a big part of it. And by the way, I think Japan is staying here because we drive on the left and they do too.
Well, we shall find out about the possible inducements that have been put in place. Brandon Lewis, I don't know if you saw Question Time last night. I've only seen the clips, making a brilliant case for being in the EU by pointing out that Northern Ireland can still trade with the EU. And that is yet more proof, really, that these people are so insulated from reality by the rhetoric and the nonsense of Brexit that they... Well, I say this advisedly, but, you know, and obviously it's not literally true, but they have got away with murder. You could argue quite easily, unless you've got a better answer as to why they, or as to how the government bear no responsibility whatsoever for the fact that the government's response to the global pandemic in this country has produced the worst death figures in the world currently. Patrick, we'll talk again. Phil's in Whitney, David Cameron country. Phil, what would you like to say?
Good morning, Jay.
Hello, Phil.
We're going to live with that for the rest of our lives.
Sure, it gets worse. There was a story. We're not doing much on Brexit yet, but because there's so much else to talk about. But there was a story the other day about a lorry load of pig heads rotting somewhere in Holland, and the first person I thought of was David Cameron. So he's got a few legacies. He's got a few legacies to deal with. Anyway, that's not why you rang in.
Dear.
Yes, oh dear, indeed.
Yes. My feeling is, my thoughts are that I think the government doing what they're doing because they just don't recognise that there are poor people in this country or how poor people are. And people are struggling to put food on the table and feed the kids, etc. And they have to go to work, so they have to use public transport. It's, they offered free meals to the school children and then took them away. They've offered this £500 if you get a positive COVID test, which is great. But what happens then? You can't stay at home and not use public transport, etc., if you can't feed the kids afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to get one of my beloved Rosetta Stones, are we? That unlocks the mystery completely and provides a neat and pithy answer to a complicated question. But poverty denial must be part of it. You look at the demographics, where the disease has been worst. You just don't understand why someone would go to work with the virus. Some of the first calls we took, tragically, given what the Mayor of London told us about the latest figures, tragically it was bus drivers that drew my attention to this issue. I think I've got it, James, but I can't afford not to go to work.
Exactly.
And they can't, I mean, even if they did know it, which they might, because they've had a year to get their head around it, so it would, I think, Phil, be odd if they hadn't. They can't admit it, they can't acknowledge it in public because it's a direct result of their own policies, their own party's policies over the last 10 years.
True. But, what do? They live in their Westminster bubble. I mean, I'm lucky I live in Witney, which is down in the south. I work from home, so I can self-isolate. I'm isolated from it to a certain extent, and I don't see the full extent of it. I see homeless people on the streets of Oxford, etc., but it's no real concept of how many people are struggling in this country. And as you say, it's more prevalent in the north. Why? Because the south is richer than the north. I hate to say it.
And among black and minority ethnic communities as well, because of the socio-economic status that they enjoy. Nothing to do, I don't think, with sort of ethnicity or biology, simply to do with poverty. So it's one or the other, and it doesn't really matter which. They're both valid answers. Why has it gone so badly? Answer, because either they're still in denial about the existence and the realities of poverty, or they can't publicly admit the existence and the realities of poverty because with 0-hour contracts, gig economies and slicing sickness pay and various other social security entitlements, they have literally created the petri dish in which the virus spreads more virulently and more fatally than it has done anywhere else in the world. There's one problem with your theory, Philip.
Go on.
Poorer countries have done better than us.
But poorer countries have a different attitude to poverty.
That's why they pay Phil the big. That's why they pay Phil the big money. Have a great week. I've got to go. I'm going to hit one break on time this week if it kills me. All right, I'll do the Anne Widdecombe thing, and then I'll see if I can remember the Hong Kong Phooey thing before close of play today. I swear to you, if you're anything close to my age, the Hong Kong Phooey revelation is going to rock your world to its very, very foundations. But yesterday, I flicked on the press conference with Priti Patel, lost the will to live and flicked it off again, but not before I noticed that she was standing on a special box in order to reach the lectern. And it reminded me, there was a dismal period in my career when, I mean, it really was, I was between jobs. And Mrs. O'Brien, to her eternal credit, had said to me, I left newspapers to go and do a TV gig. And the TV gig went incredibly well. I had my own chat show on I can't tell you where it was because then the Partridge parallels would become absolutely pure. All right, it was in Norwich. I had my own chat show on Anglia TV when I was about 28. Less said about that, the better. But the only criteria for guests was that they had to have a link to the Anglia region. And sometimes, I've got to tell you, that link was stretched to a breaking point. I still can't remember how Caprice ended up on the show. But I was working in Norwich on telly, and it all fell apart. Anglia got bought by Granada, the show I was working on. So I went almost overnight from being in the foothills of a glittering broadcasting career to being unemployed. And I said, all right, I'm going to have to go back to newspapers. And Mrs. O'Brien said, well, all right, but give yourself a year, because I think you might be... And she said it so sweetly and politely, bearing in mind we'd met on a newspaper. She'd said, I think you might be better at broadcasting than you are at newspaper journalism. Which, looking back, was quite a loaded compliment, wasn't it? And of course, the other point was I'd left Fleet Street as a show business editor, and I don't think I would have gone back in at the same level. So you would have had to go back in two rungs down, which is always a bit dispiriting, especially before you're 30. So I gave myself a year to get a broadcasting gig. And it meant that I said yes to everything. I'd be doing breakfast telly, I'd be doing the panel shows, I'd be doing paper reviews. Oh man, I think it said yes on my answer phone. Yes, I'll do it. Because I thought wrongly, it turns out, that the more you do, the more likely you are to get noticed and therefore get offered a presenting gig. Oddly, some advice for younger listeners who are dreaming of a career in the media, like Keith, oddly, it's saying no that puts you in different categories. So if you want to be considered as a presenter, then stop being a pundit on other people's shows. It's not being a catch-all, and also being a pundit on other people's shows is strangely soul-destroying unless you're desperate for the attention. So I gave myself a year to do it, and it meant that one of the regular slots, I very kindly, I don't want to sound ungrateful because I needed the work. And one of my favourites was doing Channel 5 News with Kirsty Young. Do you remember when she sort of pioneered the much more relaxed approach? God, I'm so old, aren't I? The more relaxed approach to doing the news. And it involved having a sort of, not quite a debate, but having two people from slightly different political perspectives discussing the stories of the day in the second part of the programme. You'd sit on a sofa. And I ended up one week doing it with Anne Widdecombe. And I will always remember that I arrived a tiny bit late on set, and there was an odd atmosphere, and the floor manager was consulting with his assistant and said, "Well, just get a box or something." And I was like, "What's going on? What could this possibly be?" And Anne Widdecombe had, and I'm not criticising her, just telling the story. She'd sat on the sofa and realised that her feet were dangling, like Humpty Dumpty, perhaps, sat on a wall, and she felt, possibly fairly, that this would make her look a little bit ridiculous when the camera panned around and she was caught in shot. So she was laying down the law to the studio manager, to the director, saying, "You mustn't get my feet in shot, and I need a box to rest my feet on, otherwise my little feet are going to be dangling away like Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall." I'm struggling not to have hysterics at this point, obviously, but the floor manager comes on with the box, and I, in my characteristically ebullient and charming fashion, I'm quite keen to soften the atmosphere and to break the tension that's broken out in the studio. So I spot over to the floor manager, grab the box off him and say, let me do that. This is all pre-coronavirus, by the way. There was no social distancing necessary. It was 20 years ago. So I come back and I get down on one knee in front of Anne Widdecombe, and I put the box at her feet, and she puts her feet on the box. And I can't remember why, but for some reason this shot got out. And it looked, to all intents and purposes, as if I was a shoeshine boy. And I'm down on one knee giving Anne Widdecombe's feet a little polish on live. That was why I shouldn't have got it off the floor manager, because the timings were very tight. The opening credits had started, and I'm down on one knee, looking like a shoeshine boy, giving Anne Widdecombe's shoes a polish. Maybe you had to be there. It's 11:53. Jack's in Newcastle. Jack, how have we ended up with the worst death rate in the world the third time round?
Well, I think if we look back to sort of November time, James, I think we can look that we had all that positivity looking towards Christmas, and I think one of the things is it's the government. They have to make everything positive.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no occasion that they cannot make something really triumphant and positive, and we've done this really well. And I think if we look back to November, where we were and where we are now, you just think if we had sort of continued with the lockdown or continued with tighter measures there, where would we be now? And, we're looking at it where we've got the highest weekly death rates at the moment.
He said it would be inhuman to restrict mingling at Christmas, didn't he? He said in the House of Commons in December, never mind November, it would be, the word he used was inhuman. He was trying to cast Keir Starmer as some sort of Grinch that wanted to cancel Christmas.
Well, I just think if you look at the numbers, you look at the death rates now, I think...
What's inhuman? Having the highest death rate in the world, or telling people that they can't mix at Christmas? It's not really a tough question, is it?
And I think there's that point, and I think one of the other things as well is, I understand the need to try and balance the economy and try and balance that as well with sort of the.
Well, we've got that.
position we're in
That's
in
the worst,
health
pretty much the worst in the world, one of the worst in the world as well. Our economic impacts.
But I think if you look at it in the case of the coronavirus, I think the wealth does follow the health, and I think if we had put the more stringent measures in at the time, we wouldn't, or we may not have to look towards extending things through until the end of the spring or later potentially. And I think that's one of the things that seems to get lost.
Yes, it does get lost, and it is odd. And again, it's the repetition that's most unforgivable because. You get things wrong the first. Sweden is a good example, actually. They took a punt. They took an informed decision that turned out to be catastrophically wrong, and therefore they changed course. Our decisions have been catastrophically wrong, but we keep repeating them as far as I can tell. You see hardly any change whatsoever, apart from crossing the fingers, hoping for the best, and then, as you point out, rushing to the front of the queue, rushing onto television when you've got anything even vaguely positive to announce before you've even checked whether it's plausible or not.
But I think as well, I think you do wonder whether there still is that sort of exceptionalism as well. And the reason I say that is, we've been involved and we have done sort of a fantastic job in the UK with the vaccine.
Yes, we have.
But you would think when all of that came out, you would think that we were the only country that had done anything for that.
Yes.
And I just wonder whether there is that sort of exceptionalism that...
that's in a way that I wouldn't want the vaccines to be unfolding any other way, except, of course, to say I wish every country in the world was doing equally brilliantly, because the sooner the whole population of the planet is immunised, the better for every single person on the planet. But the way they frame the vaccine success is a little bit, aren't we brilliant, we're British, and you can't have one without the other. You can't, if we're brilliant because we're British, then why do we have the highest death rate in the world?
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Can I ask what you do for a living?
Yeah, I'm a GP.
What's the worst thing you're encountering in the context of things that you can't quite believe are happening on your watch?
I mean, that's a difficult question.
Sure.
But I suppose from my point of view, it's when you look at the reason why we're doing lockdowns, we're doing the tighter measures, that's to ensure that the NHS doesn't become overwhelmed. And I think if you look at it objectively at the information that we've got now, things are worse than they were the first time, but there doesn't seem to be the same level of urgency to put tighter things in place.
That's just breathtaking, isn't it? Things are worse than they were last time, but we all, or the government leadership seems to be even laxer than it was then.
I think that's the thing that's the thing when looking at the information objectively, that's the thing I find the most sort of troubling at the moment.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. Thank you for all that you do, Jack, as a GP, to you and all of your colleagues. I don't know how hollow clapping on our doorsteps would sound now on a Thursday night, but rest assured that as long as I have a platform in the British media, I will be calling for you and your colleagues to be better respected and better rewarded for the work that you do. It's coming up to 11:59. Lots of people still keen to talk about this. I will take some more of your calls, most certainly, because the quality's been so high. But there's two other things I want to do. I want to look at the likelihood of I want to defend Priti Patel on the very specific and particular issue of fines for house parties, because I think there's loads. I genuinely do. I think young people, listen to me, I think young people are more or less returning to normal for two reasons. There's fatigue. There's like, oh, we've done this for so long now, it's the new normal, we might as well have a shindig. But also, I don't know about you, I lost just before Christmas one of my best friends, as you know, and he was just 50. I turned 49 last week. You don't feel mortal when you're that age. You just don't. It's not a conscious belief in your own immortality. It's like a subconscious belief that, whatever. So I think that might be part of the reason as well. So we'll have a look at how widespread the issue is, which will be anecdotal, of course, and then we'll look at why. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're aware of people in their 60s getting together for a knees up. Maybe the local line dancing club has blacked out the windows at the social, and they're all tripping the light fantastic every Friday night. I just doubt it. I just think it is more likely to be bored and quite possibly horny young people who are desperate to get together again. And that's why they brought in this law, which at first glance looked ridiculous. What do you mean an £800 fine for gatherings of more than 15? But at second glance just makes you think, well, they must have evidence of lots of gatherings of more than 15 people. So stay tuned for that. And the Hong Kong Fooey Scoop. Just had a sneak peek at the Financial Times long read on that negotiation that ended on Christmas Eve with regard to the Brexit deal. And, well, once again, you begin to wonder whether someone at Nissan got a phone call last night. Because this is going to be, well, if you care about facts, and if we've learned anything from Brexit, it's that those of us who care about facts are in the minority. Whether we still are or not, I don't know. I mean, my belief was that we weren't, which is why I was so keen to have a second referendum, because as Jacob Rees-Mogg once said, you know, you should obviously have a vote when you know what it's going to look like. After you've won a vote on whether or not you're going to have a look at what it's going to look like. But Pete Foster, who is a familiar feature on this programme, is one of the journalists at the FT who has done this long read, and some of the some of the detail contained within it is simultaneously chilling and utterly unsurprising. I like this one. Over the autumn, Johnson deployed what aides called a madman strategy to jolt the talks back to life, threatening to break international law in relation to the Brexit withdrawal treaties, Northern Ireland Protocol, and suggesting he could walk away from talks altogether. I don't think the madman strategy was a guarantee of success, says one EU official. I never felt people trembling or impressed. The view during a discussion among EU leaders in October, he adds, was if it has to be no deal, then no deal it will be. So he called their bluff, and they called it back, which is why we've ended up with such an absolute pile of rubbish. Although, of course, many members of my profession, the British media, the magnificent Fourth Estate, can be relied upon to describe a sow's ear as a silk purse. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. I don't know how we're going to do this. Can I really get away with simply saying on the radio, give me a call if you're still attending lots of house parties? Or let's find out. Matthew's in Hatfield. Michael's in Hatfield. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Second time caller.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. So basically, I've attended a few house parties in the past.
Well, so have I. But it depends what you mean by past.
Okay, well, during, I'll say, before the second lockdown.
Oh, mate.
As well.
Oh, Michael.
I know, but
what?
I've stopped now because, to be honest with you, I'm with everyone in the same boat in this kind of thing, because during the first lockdown, everyone was quite adamant to listen to everything the government was saying.
Right.
Like, we were very, very on point. There was not many parties. No one was going out much. The issue was, obviously, once everything started to loosen down, and they gave everyone a taste of going back out again,
yes,
going to bars and such. Once they locked everything down again, everybody had that taste. That fatigue had fully hit. I remember earlier in the year when the first lockdown happened, one of the things the government was worried about was lockdown fatigue.
Yeah, and yes, they were.
They fully did hit a lot of the young people. So a lot of the young people that, for example, might work in bars or they might work in the entertainment industry. After the second lockdown hit, they continued doing it, having parties, legal raves and whatnot.
Yeah.
So obviously, in a way of obviously trying to keep that, the party industry going.
If you were to, how old are you? Do you mind me asking that?
I'm 26.
Bingo, bang on. If you were to make a few calls, how likely is it that you could get yourself invited to a party this weekend?
Yeah, snap of the finger.
Wow.
Snap of the finger.
There it is, you see. So Priti Patel, oddly, a lot of middle-aged journalists like me, and I stopped myself from doing it, largely because I'd seen so many others do it already, but lots of middle-aged journalists like me are going, why has she introduced this? This is ridiculous. Is it just me, or is this the stupidest thing? And actually, she is aware of a genuine problem, which is that the youth of today is attending parties, still attending house parties on an industrial scale.
The thing is, it's actually a really good policy to bring in because, I mean, like I've said, I'm not really attending these parties anymore, but that £800 fine would deter me from attending the parties. It really would. So it would.
Right, we need a klaxon. So this is a decent policy alert from Priti Patel, possibly the first time ever.
I mean, if you were to think about New Year's Eve, I didn't go out New Year's Eve. I just chilled with a couple of my friends. I didn't go out. But
I don't even think you were supposed to do that, Michael. Were you?
It was two. So I'm going to get myself a bit of. Yeah. I'm going to give myself a little slap on the wrist for that. But the amount of parties on New Year's Eve was absolutely ridiculous.
Was it really?
On social media, there was parties with hundreds and hundreds of people. And the thing is, obviously, the police are going to shut down parties. And if you've been to a party, most times you've been to one that's been shut down. So you know how easy it is for the police to do that. If there was a £800 fine to do so, a lot of people would stay indoors. Because I feel like a lot of young people are like, look, we know there's a virus.
But if the parties you could attend are still going on this weekend, then the £800 threat probably isn't as an effective a deterrent as we might hope.
It would, because once you know somebody that has received the fine, then that's how it starts to deter the parties. Because I don't know, when the £10,000 fines were happening, it wasn't until I heard a story about a kid in Nottingham had a £10,000 fine. That's when a lot of people went, "Oh, okay."
Oh, did they?
Yeah, a lot of people said, "Okay, it could happen." But I know some people that they're like, "Okay, we're not doing it anymore," because it is doable. I think after this weekend, if there are people starting to get fined, there'll be a deterrent in it. It's not going to stop it completely because people are creative. There's ways of getting around it.
Why is it? I mean, listen, I was young. Put me in a position where I'm about to say I was young once, honest. But I was also, I'm not unfamiliar with illegal raves and what have you. And I can't imagine for a minute what I'd have been like if I was 26 now. I know I was a lot less responsible. I was an even bigger idiot than I am today. But what is it? What's not landed, Michael? Why is it that we've got, give or take, there's 100,000 people who've died of this virus, and yet people in their late teens and 20s are still desperate to fight for the right to party?
I think it's two things. I think it's first, the fear of the virus. So,
but you mean they don't have it? They don't have the fear of the virus?
We don't have the fear.
No.
At the first lockdown, there was a big fear on the virus. Like, I remember a lot of people that had asthma that were young. They were like, okay, this could affect me.
Yeah.
As we're learning more about the virus, a lot of these people no longer have that fear. So it's like, okay, I've got asthma, I'll be fine. Do you know what I mean? And obviously, we do know that obviously it is affecting millions of people that have underlying health issues that are old. But there's a lot of people that they're seeing that have had the virus that are 70, 80 might be.
So that enforces the idea that it's not going to happen to me.
Exactly that. It's the I can't remember the fear is, but the idea of it only when it affects me, that's when it matters. If it was a killer virus that was killing anybody, no matter what age, everyone's staying indoors, there wouldn't be this issue. And I think there's also the problem of a lot of, the anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers putting the rhetoric of it's just a virus. The idea that mental health is more important than the actual virus. There's a lot of people putting that rhetoric out that there's no need to stop my life. My mental health could be affected. And some people are saying that obviously me partying helps my mental health, which is a bigger pandemic.
And there's a deep hypocrisy to this mental health rhetoric as well, because it's coming largely from people that were absolutely silent when mental health services were being sliced to the bone. We're going to talk to Natasha Devon about this a little later this hour.
It only works for when it fits to you, basically.
Isn't it? So you know how it works, Michael. Care passionately about statues because of our culture, but if you want to shut libraries, that's absolutely fine. Mate, 100%. Well, I'm glad you've ended up on the right side of history, but thank you for your honesty in describing what it was like to be on the wrong side. 12:12 is the time, and I don't want to turn into one of those people, I probably already have, who just forgets that I was ever young. Do you know, I was out with a mate before this lockdown, yonks ago, and he started complaining about some young people misbehaving. And he's my age, one of my oldest pals. We go way back. And I had to say to him, I said, you used to have a literal party trick, because it used to drive me potty. I was constantly trying to stop him from doing it and even dragging him down. He had two party tricks. One was climbing scaffolding when we'd fallen out of a nightclub at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And the other one was running down a street over the cars. So, park cars in a row, leaping off the boot of one onto the bonnet of the other and setting off every single alarm on the street. That was his party trick. I used to despise it. I used to hate it. And then suddenly, fast forward, I'm listening to him bellyache about how the youth of today ain't got no respect for authority. It's ridiculous. Louise is in Stoke Newington. Louise, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think I really do agree with what Priti Patel has said, and I don't think that mass gatherings should be happening, and I'm totally pro-lockdown. But I think the messaging is a bit problematic, because if you're going to address the nation and say, we're going to fine you if you're meeting in groups of up to 15 people,
yes,
then people will automatically think, okay, well, if that's the case, then I can meet up with 5 people this weekend and there won't be any consequences. And I think there's probably more people doing that kind of activity than these mass gatherings and these parties.
So,
I think
so the implicit message is gatherings of fewer than 15 are okay.
Exactly. It's like, you know that you won't get fined. So I actually think that the messaging is a bigger problem here, because I think it will encourage smaller mass gatherings, so to speak. And I think it could actually create more of a problem.
Oh, I hope not. Well, we all hope not, don't we? Are you? I mean, this is you in the realms of theoretical speculations rather than you knowing people who are going to. Right.
Of course.
No, we're all in a similar boat. We're all flying.
I have to say that I do know a lot of people that do break the rules, and I think that will definitely come into their thought processes when they hear that messaging. They'll think, okay, well, it's okay then.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32.
32. Do you reckon you could get yourself an invite to a house party this weekend if you made a few calls or not?
Not a house party, but definitely like some kind of
Really?
I don't know, dinner thing.
Really?
Yeah, not that I would go.
No, I understand, but you means you know people who are doing that. Because I got a couple of texts. I didn't really understand them when I was talking about how my colleagues in their 20s, one of them had 3 parties off the top of her head that she could go to this weekend if she was, not working with massive broadcasting talent and therefore responsible for the safety and the sanity of the nation and not wanting to infect Keith. But but then I got a couple of messages going, all right, well, what about dinner parties? Would you be able to go to a dinner party? And I thought, no, I wouldn't. We're having got a family birthday coming up this weekend, and we're having a magic show over Zoom, which we'll all be watching from different houses. But yeah, maybe. I mean, Louise tells the story of her life, and there you go. People are just bored of it now, and that boredom is exacerbated and magnified by the continuing failure of clarity and leadership. And also, yet again, I know it can be a stuck record sometimes, but how can people in this business, in this industry, still be getting paid for spreading scepticism about lockdowns and nonsense about the virus and stupidity about safety? It just beggars belief. I would never, ever, ever want to see anybody sort of actively silenced for saying anything other than things that could cause death. And here we are. Do you know, I wonder whether the answer to the question in the last hour about the shamefully high, tragically high, woefully, horribly high death toll that the United Kingdom is still enduring, currently the highest in the world on that 7-day rolling average, despite all the privations and the horrors of lockdown. And clarity and leadership is my catchphrase. Leadership is fairly self-explanatory. Clarity is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? And I do wonder whether the fact that you would probably struggle to tell me precisely what you can and can't do right now, or indeed this weekend, wouldn't you? Even the police, and I think they deserve to be defended the first few times this happens, because they're turning on a sixpence. Even the police get confused about what you can and can't do, which is why those women who got collared for walking together while drinking tea in the forest, which was X miles away from their home, which may have been against the guidance, but then Boris Johnson got caught cycling 7 miles away from home, so the guidance became even more confused. So Aaron listing the things he could do this weekend if he wasn't working, and I've got to be honest with you, mate, it took me a while to work out why you kept mentioning hip flasks. Why is he mentioning hip flasks? And that's, of course, because it's a way of having a little party, even though you're not having a party. So these are the things Aaron could do this weekend if he wasn't working. And as he says, I might otherwise have been tempted, but I'm working, so that saves me from temptation. There's a cross-country walk involving hip flasks that some of his mates are going on. How many people are allowed to meet up for a cross-country walk? Anyone? I think it's just 2. Or is it 2 households? I think it's just 2 individual. So that's already in breach, but you'll claim you're not together. You'll claim you're not together. So you'll all walk in twos. It'll be like being back at school, queuing up for swimming. Do you remember that? Swimming. Cha-cha-cha. No? Oh, just me. So you had to pair off and you'd queue up for swimming in twos. So you go for a nice little walk, 2 by 2. A cross-country walk involving hip flasks, a 30-plus mile cycle ride involving hip flasks. Well, that's a whole heap of potential trouble. I checked. You can be found drunk in charge of a bicycle. I checked because there was the first recorded case this week of a woman, or indeed a man, a human, being convicted of being drunk in charge of an e-scooter. So that's already dangerous. You driving around on bikes, drunk. Honestly, the youth of today. A shed party. I've got a nice shed. And a house party of about 6 to 10 people. So, I mean, it is possible that Priti Patel has actually got something right. The problem is, as Louise suggested, and as this tweeter points out, I read the latest announcement, James, and I immediately thought, I'll just ring 13 other people and we can have a party. And if tens of thousands of people across the country had exactly the same thought, then, yeah, not such a great pronouncement from Priti Patel. We're introducing a new £800 fine for those attending house parties. This will double for each repeat offence up to a maximum of £6,400. At this crucial time, please stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. So I'd prepared a perfect alliteration for you. Would you like to hear it? Priti Patel produces positive policy. And now I'm beginning to think that, as with my brief flirtation with the Matt Hancock fan club, I may have to retreat from my words of positivity and reflect instead the reality of the awfulness of this government's conduct at almost every turn. Simon's in Wandsworth. Simon, if you can remember why you rang in, I shall give you the money myself.
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
First of all, as an Uber driver, I'll tell you this. It's not just the young people who go out. It's all ages, middle class especially. They go to their house party.
All right. Why'd you start pointing at me?
I'm just telling you. So I'm listening to you.
All right.
And I'm hearing all young. It's not just the young people.
Right.
And I look at it like this. Regardless of the rules of what the government's giving out, it's a bit like Brexit, where people are either going to do their own thing, they're for or against.
Yeah.
Some people just said they had enough. They're not stopping their life. They're getting on with it. And other people are like, no, I'll stay at home. It's convenient anyway. And I hear a lot of stories from people in the Uber.
So you're picking people up who've been at dinner parties or who've been at...
All going.
Yeah, well, obviously all going. You've got to get there. It's A to B and B to A, isn't it? But, I mean, what, every day, would you say? I mean, over the weekend, for example.
Well, it's not just over... Because if you're in that kind of circuit, you've got certain kind of people who are going to go on the weekend and other people who go throughout the week. But either way is people are going to do what they want to do.
And why aren't they doing what they should do, in your view?
Well, it's like I said, they just don't think the corona thing's going to bother them.
But what's failing to land? We've got the maybe it is again linked to the conversation we just had. We've got the highest death toll in the world, but we've got a government that's behaving as if they're doing really, really well. And so almost implicitly or subconsciously, people are in denial about the scale of the problem because the bloody government is in denial about the scale of the problem.
No, there's two things there. One is if you trust the government, and two, it's your own personal fate. What are you going to do? How would you want to... If you're going to die or if you're going to get sick, how do you want to die? That's the kind of question.
Pardon my French.
And some people just say, if I'm going to die, I'll die in a nightclub or in a house party with my friends.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, they're just daft.
Well, each to their own.
Well, each to their own. But also they're putting you at risk, aren't they? In a way.
Well, I'm not a person who's really worried about the corona. I exercise. I eat healthy.
Good.
I do all these things the government doesn't tell us to do.
Well, that's a good point.
The government doesn't tell us to... It doesn't even encourage the sick to try and exercise.
Vitamin D.
All those things.
All of this.
Black seed oil, all these things that help your respirational system.
You should see the state.
About that.
You should see the state of the smoothie that I've got in the studio with me this morning. I kid you not. Seriously, it's got more vegetables in it than the average greengrocer. But anyway, we digress slightly. I know what you mean, but do be super careful. Do the hand washing as well and the mask wearing and all of that, won't you?
Yeah.
Promise?
Yeah.
Promise? No, I mean it, man. It's all very well taking your flax seeds, but if you're not washing your hands and wearing your mask...
Well, I wash my hands anyway, but my thing is, it's not just the young people. It's all types of people from all walks of life.
You live and learn. It's just because I lead such a saintly existence, I was unaware of all of... I genuinely was, actually. I've seen one friend for about the last 3 months. It was quite funny because he's an Irish fella. He's very Irish. And we just met up for a drink and we were dressed identically. We were both wearing kind of Michael Foot-style bomber jackets and navy blue beanie hats. And we went to the pub near me where you could buy, before the current level of lockdown, you could buy beer in the 2-litre bottles, the 2-pint bottles that normally have milk in them. You know the ones I mean, with the little handle on it. And so we had a couple of pints each. And we went and sat on a bench 2 metres apart, very near a railway bridge. And it occurred to me, we both took a drink, and he's talking to me in his deep and charming Irish burr. And I actually thought to myself, I'm pretty sure that my housemaster at school predicted that I would end up drinking under a railway bridge with other Irishmen. It's come true, but it wasn't supposed to be in these circumstances. Joshua's in Chelmsford. Joshua, what's going on?
Hello. Just wanted to say that I think it's a good thing that we're punishing people for having house parties, but if they bring in the £500 for testing positive, then theoretically they're only getting fined £300.
There's always one, isn't there? So you go to a party, you get caught, you get infected, but you get your £500 bonus from the government, so swings and roundabouts, it was worth it in the end.
Exactly. Like a typical night out in Chelmsford where I live is probably about £150.
Good Lord, what are you eating?
So two nights out is
£300
for having a house party.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 24.
If you wanted to go to a house party this weekend, how hard would it be for you to find one?
Maximum of 3 text messages.
And do you reckon the £800 fine? I don't think, for the record, this £500 payout is going to happen, but I could be wrong. It has been known in the past. But has the £800 threat made any difference at all to your mates' plans?
Not to my plans in particular. I'm very...
No, I know. That's why I said your mates, the people you'd be sending the text messages to.
It's not even my mates. It would be mates of mates, if you know what I mean.
We're getting pinned down in the technicalities here. The people that are having parties, do you think the £800 threat is going to have any deterrent effect on them?
Not to 70% of the people that are already having them, to be honest.
And not first time round. I'll have to wait until some people actually get slapped with one, and then next time round, next weekend or next party, they'll think, do you know what? Actually, Joshua got hit with an 800... Not you, Joshua. The other Joshua got hit. Keith got hit with an £800 fine last week, and I think I'll stay at home and watch... what's on at the weekends at the moment? What is the stay-at-home programme? That new thing, It's a Sin, looks good. Have you seen that on Channel 4? Tell you what we love. Absolutely love Death in Paradise. One of the best things on telly. And Ralph Little, who I am delighted to say is a pal of mine, is knocking it out of the park at the moment on that. If you haven't watched it, you've got 3 you can watch on catch-up from the new series. Let's go to Brentwood. Matthew is there. Matthew, what can you tell me?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I just wanted to talk about sort of what I see on social media. So I'm 22.
22.
And I'm seeing an increasing number of people my age having parties. And I pretty much put it down to this analogy. When you first start driving, the speed limit's really important.
Yes.
Make sure you stick to 30. And the longer you drive, and we've all done it, you slowly increase how far you're willing to push the boundary.
Okay.
And I think as time's gone on, people realised, okay, it's not me. And I think one of your callers said earlier, it's that sort of, it's not going to happen to me. It's not, you know. And I see a lot of them tweeting about mental health.
Yeah. Oh, do you really? Crikey.
Yeah, but it didn't seem to matter before they wanted to party. And I think what Priti Patel is doing with the fine is good, but I just think it comes crossing the wrong way.
Because of the figure. I mean, it hadn't really clocked with me, and actually that might be why many other middle-aged journalists were expressing befuddlement at what it was supposed to design, because you could easily look at that announcement and think, well, I'll just have 14. I'll have 13 mates round this weekend.
That's why I thought it should have just been a blanket number. if it's anything above the rules, why not just, you know, if you're doing 40 above 30...
Yeah, we'll be here all day, won't we? We need to get our abacuses out. What distinguishes you from your peer group, then, if indeed it does? Because you may not have been completely honest with me, Matthew. You might have been tripping the light fantastic every Friday night since January without letting it slip on the radio. But why, if you are looking at the invitation to party differently from your mates, why do you think that is?
Well, I'm an introvert, so I've got no mates.
Seriously? I mean, you're just not a big one for partying?
No, even when I was in school, I wasn't a big one. So
fair enough.
But and that's sort of, I understand it. I do understand it. Like, obviously, you want to get out with your mates and live your young life.
Yes.
I don't have a desire to do that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. And so you're seeing it on your socials, but you're not remotely tempted to do it yourself, because even if we weren't in lockdown, you know, a room full of sweaty bodies is not your idea of a top night out. Well, welcome to my world, actually, these days, although when I was 22, I was possibly a slightly different creature. This is every call, and I can tell you, the problem, do you know what? Here is... Talk about first world problems in a nutshell. I used to say, I don't know how long you've been listening to this programme, but I used to say, crikey, the switchboard's buzzing. And that was a way of gauging, unless I'd asked a really stupid question, like, you know, ever get a parking ticket you're unhappy with, or give me a ring and be a bit racist. And then the phones will just ring off the hook every day. But now, there's no point me even saying it, because it's just a permanent state of affairs. So if I say, crikey, this is really interesting, my phones are ringing off the hook, which means there's loads of parties going on. My phones are ringing off the hook even when I haven't asked you a question at the moment. This is me jinxing next week. So I cannot extrapolate from the busyness of my switchboard the scale of the problem, but I can say... What can I say? I can say with confidence that there are a hell of a lot of people with a hell of a lot of stories about a hell of a lot of parties. Graham is in Newell. Graham, what's your angle? That's 2 for 2 now on Graham. There's something wrong with line 1. Chris is in Brent. Chris, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. One, I totally agree. I mean, it seems certain that to name the number of 15 is a mistake.
There must be a reason for it. You know me. I like to work stuff out before I throw rotten tomatoes at it. They must have thought, you know, we can't make it 5 because that's impossible to police. So I think they've chosen a figure. I can't believe you got me doing PR for Priti Patel, Chris. But they must have chosen a figure that
people would spot. People would see it happening.
It's an undebatable party going on there. It's not just a big family or a student house.
Yes, I suppose you couldn't claim it was your household group as easily.
Exactly.
I guess that is what's behind it. But going back to the other part of what you were saying is how to get this message into there is a large amount of younger people. I mean, I see that with my own eyes, who don't seem to be adhering to the rules as much. I'm afraid it's just one of the symptoms of the kind of society that we have cultivated, much more self-centered and focused, I'm afraid. It's not that they're bad people, but it's just the way, it's a prevailing attitude among that generation. Even I'm the same generation as you, James. I used to be a massive partier.
Well, we'd have been. I don't think we can get away with this. I don't think that the people in their 20s now are any more. They're less selfish than we were, mate. Of course they are. They invented wokeness. They're the people that are out there all the time trying to fight against inequality and injustice. They just feel immortal, and we were exactly the same when we were in our 20s.
I think there's two camps. I think there's big camps that still exist. There was always a load of people who were thoughtful and kind and empathetic, and there are always people who didn't really think about others. I think that camp might have become more entrenched, maybe.
I think I probably hang out with more young people than you do.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm still a bit of a lad around town.
Are you still a bit of a geezer? In my experience, the whole movement of millennial and then the new generation has been one of more inclusivity, more decency, more basic compassion. I could be wrong, but I don't know that we can get away with the old git defence that the youth of today don't have no respect for their elders or the rules. I'm pretty sure I'd be behaving like an idiot if I was 24, because when I was 24, most of the time I behaved like an idiot. Right, third time lucky. If he's not there now, heads are going to roll. Graham's in Newell. Graham, what would you like to say? It was his fault, not our fault. Why do you keep putting him on if his phone line's so dodgy? Honestly, I don't know how just unbelievable. All right, I'll give him another go. Graham, are you there? Daniel's in Dartford. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Hello, I'm definitely here.
Thank you, so am I.
Basically, I agree that I think there should be fines. I think it's whiny and pathetic that people are upset that they can't have a party. I'm saying that from a very biased point of view because I feel I'm forced to go the other side of the wall. As I say, there's been lots of Walking Dead analogies in my family.
Go on.
During the pandemic. Because I was part of the excluded, so I've received nothing from the government. I had to basically walk away from my 20-year career.
Oh, no.
And I'm now labouring on a building site, and I don't want to be here. I don't feel safe. I'm 39, white and English, and I have I'm not in any of the groups. You know what I mean? I'm going to be last to get a vaccine. I'm the last to get asked to get tested. I'm not getting any benefits from anyone. So I'm having to put myself in what I consider a dangerous position.
And there are people who are doing it for,
They're doing it for fun.
I nearly used an inappropriate phrase that has the word "and" giggles at the end of it, but that must really boil your bananas.
I spoke to Sheila a couple of months ago. I came up with probably the most intelligent thing I've ever said, which was the lifeboat analogy that I've been chipping in for 20 years, paying taxes to build the lifeboat for everyone when it goes wrong. And now it's gone wrong. There's not enough room for me on the lifeboat. 3 million of us have been cast adrift. I'm not sure if that's going to change. There's lots
and if it does change, it's not going to be retrospective. You mentioned Sheila, Daniel, and we've already taken up 14 seconds of her time, but I wish you all the very best. I really do. It's an absolute nightmare that you're in, and the notion that it's happened under a Tory government probably shocks you even more than it shocks me.